Hello, everybody, and welcome to another SIG Windows meetup. Thank you all for attending. It's the 18th of June, and 1.15 is officially pretty much out the door, so we're starting to concentrate on the next release. Couple of quick announcements for today. The first thing is our documentation has changed location. So if you are looking for the docs in their original location, which used to be Kubernetes.io, docs, setup Windows, it's no longer there. Now it's in Kubernetes.io, docs, setup production environment Windows. So make sure if you're sending links to folks, don't copy the old links because it's just going to give them a 404. So I don't know why they made that change. I was not aware of it until today. I want to find out Cardic from people that let me know about it. So I was like, okay, that's kind of killing us. So that's it. Obviously we are a little bit, we didn't deliver a lot of things in 1.15, but we made a tremendous amount of progress. So now the responsibility is on us as NSIG to kind of take the ball from what it is and try to make a lot of progress, whether that's run as username or containerd or kubedm, to kind of deliver a lot of that functionality with the next release, which will come definitely before KubeCon. So it gives us enough time to test drive them and obviously move them forward for the 1.17 and 1.18 releases. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the privileged containers proposal. We said that last time that we're going to provide the opportunity for folks to read the document and provide feedback and see if that's something that they like from the different options that Patrick outlined. So Patrick, you got the mic.
Sure, I could pull that up. Hold on a second here. You just share the right window again. And I have too many browser windows open. Okay, there we go. So I don't know if there's been much progress from last week that's here. Probably one update that I do have is that, let me see if I've got some stuff on here. So I don't think I'm going to be getting support for privileged containers in the version of Windows that ships this year. So it would be sometime in 2020 at the earliest. So let me clarify that here. So I'll make sure to get that clear in there. Let me see if there were any other updates in here. Yeah, so it looks like Yuju did a bunch of comments after the meeting last week. And so it looks like the proposal is whether or not we should consolidate on having one proxy rather than a separate one for networking and storage.
Yeah, I mean, on the file system issue, I mean, she's right? So this is not going to be the same approach as having privileged containers in Linux, right? There's certain concessions that needs to be made where the application that's taking advantage of this needs to be aware of both the file systems and the circumstances under which it's getting that elevated privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, we're not going to have the expectation that any app that worked on Linux under privileged containers is going to move into Windows and everything's going to work. That's not going to be the case. I think the motivation here and what you're trying to do is basically start enabling some of the CSIs first and some of the other things that potentially need elevated permissions and not making a general purpose approach. So I think that's fine. I don't disagree with the comments that Yuju made. It's good for us to clarify that, this is not the intended purpose.
Yeah.
Well, I think option C is that intended purpose, right? Which is providing a generic mechanism for host processes. I think B is more geared towards, highly aware plugins of some sort that needs to do specific privileged operations. But I think the goal with option C is can we have a highly generic mechanism that anything can leverage, any Windows app without any modification.
But that requires changes in Windows, right?
No, option C does not. It's more of a container D based mechanism.
But option C doesn't solve the packaging problem, right? I mean, that is a bigger, why would somebody go with a privileged container? In my opinion, is two parts. One is to do some privileged operations on the host. Second is to service that binary in a container fashion, right? With option C, you won't get that.
Correct. Like you can package it as a container, but it'll unpack as a binary.
And you can't service it, right? I mean, you won't have a container image and you can't do all those things.
Right.
So option C, in my opinion, doesn't solve the overlay daemon, the requirements that Docker had, right?
It solves the it makes distribution more consistent with containers because of the packaging, but it doesn't solve the configuration management problem. Yes.
So I don't know how much. So that's why I feel like I agree with the generic proxy. And once privileged containers come into play, it will be an easy ramp up to move the proxy to a privileged container, in my opinion.
Why? Sorry, can you explain why the C doesn't, or what the limitation of C is?
There's no file system isolation from the host. And so if you want to do something like replace an old version of the plugin with a new version, you can still have conflicts there because each one is running unbounded. And so you don't get any of the resource or separation. This is a separate discussion from security boundary. It's basically creating these is not going to be an idempotent operation.
I see. Yeah.
And the other thing is the customer has to do it anyway different for Linux and Windows, right? With option C. With option B, the customer will still have to have a container. She can reuse whatever he's running it in Windows versus Linux. And the only thing is we will inject some proxies to handle the privilege calls.
Oh, you're thinking actually the containers syscalls would be intercepted and I see. I thought we were just going to change it so that you'd still run a container like Flannel or something, but that it would be specifically the Windows code would call out to a proxy, Oh,
no, I was thinking the Windows code. Second option. I didn't think about the syscall interception, even though that is a good idea. That means
that seems crazy.
Privilege container itself. I would rather. Anyway.
Yeah.
I think what I mean is it's an easier ramp for them to move to privileged container once privileged container is available from option 2, is my opinion.
You said from option D?
Option B, the proxies.
Oh, the proxies, okay. Because then you can just package them both in the same container later.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I initially thought C was the better just because it's, obviously going to be the thing that doesn't need any kind of extension really. Once you can run a host process, then it's all the syscalls are available, where B is if we need new APIs, then we constantly need to be adding more proxies or updating them. But
it is not generic enough.
Yeah.
The versioning and all will become very relevant if you want to make it super generic.
Yeah, agreed.
And we're gonna need either with B or C, we still need to change a program like Flannel to be aware that it's going to run like in a container and need to talk. Well, no, I guess with C, we wouldn't have to change Flannel. Well, except again for like
You
knowing
need
that
to
it's
do it
not
special
running.
for Windows. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, C would still need to do some interesting things to make it reflect host paths and things of that nature rather than making the assumptions that things are just mounted to a nice, clean location.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we're also kind of at the point where it's like this proposal seems thorough and we just need to like make a decision on how to move forward.
So as far as option B goes, I mean, I think that's the direction that Deep has already kind of gone down, at least for the storage proxy. Is that code that's available that others could look at, or is that just like a prototype you were doing on your own?
It's a prototype. Like I can make it available. What happened was I pretty much got it working with CSI, but then the Kubernetes plugin watcher took in a massive change where they went from like a regular model that they had to more of a conciliation model or a controller model. And that seems to have some issues with the way things are working in Windows. So I'm debugging that at the moment. So plugin registration just broke in Windows after that change landed like a week back. So I'm running, going to those. Hopefully I'll, be able to figure it out by this week. And
Which kind of plugin registration?
so the kubelet has something called the plugin watcher that all the CSI plugins and GPU and stuff registers with. So basically that used to be like, a regular piece of code that would look at file system notifications around the socket paths from the different plugins. Now that change, that code like took a pretty major change like a couple of weeks back, I think, or like about a week back, where it moved to more of a controller model where they constantly monitor the paths, try to clean things up. So now the plugin registration all of a sudden seems to be broken in top of tree. So I'm debugging that problem. Once I have that figured out, I can make
and this is different from the kubelet listeners, because like there was some code to support device plugins that we intentionally disabled because there were no tests for it. And I believe that's a different code path.
This is basically the package plugin watcher. Package kubelet plugin watcher. And that was working earlier on Windows with the iNotify Golang interface. But yeah, right now that seems to be kind of having some issues after the new change came in.
Yeah, this is the one I was talking about. So if you could check that and see if that's, I don't think this is needed for what you're doing, but if you could double check, that would be helpful.
Oh, okay.
So 78704.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on that.
Okay. So
the net of it is once that I figure out whatever is going wrong, like once I have that working, then it should be pretty easy for me to publish like a set of changes, like the entry side, things I needed to change on the deployment YAMLs themselves, which is pretty simple, and then the actual changes in the plugin itself.
Okay. But would you be able to open that code, or is that something that?
Right. I was thinking of like asking for a SIG, what is it, Kubernetes SIGs, something under there to kind of start publishing it, but maybe I can just post it locally on GitHub for everyone to take a look and then go from, like, once a cap gets published and everyone approves, we can like ask for a proper SIG reading.
So we do have this SIG Windows tools repo that I think would be appropriate.
Okay, great.
Like that's where we put WinCat, which is needed for the port forward that Ben contributed.
Sure.
And so for things that are built out of the main Kubernetes repo but might be needed for Windows nodes, I think that was kind of the intention of this repo.
Okay. Add it there for now.
But really quickly on WinCat, because I was gonna bring it up later on. So now that we have WinCat, right, someone needs to rebuild the pause image using WinCat. Do you have that documented somewhere that we can point to people? I didn't see any docs updates on that.
No, yeah, that's kind of the problem where we're at right now, because all the pause containers, I think, are being built separately. We're not like using one standard one.
Well,
So,
Microsoft built the pause container for us, right? So,
I guess in PKS, like we're still using kind of the SDN style thing, where I think we build the pause container right on the nodes themselves. I don't know. I don't know what other people are doing, but yeah, we're not consuming the Microsoft one. But to your point,
okay.
we should like work on adding instructions and like standardizing that. But
Okay.
I don't think there's anything right now.
Okay, so if you can send me some rough notes, I'll tidy them up and validate them and run them through once in my environment. And if they work, I'll just publish them. So I can do that, and then we can ask Microsoft and Patrick and Craig were the ones that worked on that, and they built the original post container that was pushed on MCR. We can have them also rebuild that using the same method.
Okay, yeah, I've got that on my list. So I've got that Docker file in another repo, but I'll see if I can just get it into this one for now.
Okay.
Because it's going to be different. I was going to look at a multi-stage build that uses the Golang image to build that and then copy it in there. And then, so yeah, I'll take that as a note. Sorry, I just haven't had a chance to do that yet.
But Patrick, if you just send me some rough stuff, I'll figure it out. I can do that. It's up to you.
Yeah, the main thing is I need to make sure it passes in the workflow that's used to build the images on MCR.
Oh, okay.
And so I've got someone on my team that can help with that.
Got it. Okay.
So, okay, sorry. Well, going back to the privilege stuff. So, I mean, it sounds like there's a little bit of consensus around going with B, especially if we've got some working prototypes there. Has anybody looked at this from a network standpoint? Is there some code that could be shared there as well?
I need to take a look at. So there was a prototype that Docker built. I don't know, Deep, is that built on top of that or?
Yes. So there were some specifications. It seems like we don't really need it anymore. So I'll see if there might be some concerns around open sourcing it. So I'm not sure about the networking piece.
Okay.
Yeah. The story.
Okay. Kalya has moved today, so I'll follow up with Kalya and get back to you next week.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if there's anything we could publish, that would be great. Because I think those are going to be the two most common use cases.
And on the storage side, I also spoke to Andy Zhang this week. I think he works out of China on Azure stuff. And he mentioned he's also kind of pursuing the direction of just CSS plugins by themselves, like regular binaries.
Yeah, basically option D.
Basically option
D. Yeah. I mean, just to be transparent, I think that at least from if I think about this from a cloud provider perspective, since we're already publishing custom images that will be used with a container service like AKS, we're probably going to have some form of D just because the binaries are already packaged in there. But that's really kind of an implementation detail. I mean, if we're going to use the same plugin outside, then option B and D are really not that different from each other because it's just where you install the binaries. So. Okay. I didn't have anything else new on this. Sounds like we'll see if there's some prototypes that we can look at as a next step. Did anybody have other topics they wanted to talk about on this?
Seems you're good on this.
Sorry, I missed that. What was that?
Yeah, I was saying it seems you're good. Let's move on with option B for now.
Okay.
I had a question around what are the latest guidelines around being able to vendor external stuff? It seems like one of the other areas we were looking at that Jean was taking a look at was potentially, since we have the iSCSI entry provider, porting it to make sure it can also support Windows. So rather than just iSCSI ADM as it does in Linux, can it be made to work with iSCSI commandlets that are there today as a flex volume plugin? Like, can that be brought in entry? And some of the things around that. So I think he has a sort of a prototype going, but one of the concerns where like we need to get like Go bindings going for some of these things. And is there like a huge reservation against being able to vendor in like an external library at this point in entry?
And so you're talking.
Go ahead, Patrick.
And so this was just going to be like a in-tree utility library, or the question was to take the library for Windows storage operations out of tree?
Yeah, so basically have kind of like a Go bindings for some of the Windows calls, like, keep it out of tree, like as an independent vendor library that anything beyond Kubernetes can also use if they want to do iSCSI stuff for Windows, and then have the Kubernetes entry iSCSI provider call into this library by vendering it in. I was just wondering if there's any thoughts on like how strong the opposition is against vendoring in new things. It seems like there is. We were just trying to vendor in something really tiny, and there was like, holy cow, what are you doing? You can't vendor in new things. But is there a process around that? Do you guys know?
I think the right thing is we need to take it to the SIG architecture office hours. Okay. And create a proposal ahead of time. Think of this as a small Word document talking about what we want to do. We send it to them so they get a chance to read it for a few days and then show up at office hours. So we can all show up, me, you, Patrick, if you want, and chat about it. But the first thing is you guys need to create a document.
So I guess the other option would be, if this is something that's closely related to making HCS calls on Windows, maybe we put in HCS shim.
Oh, okay.
And so it wouldn't be a new vendor library, but we could basically, if we needed to do things like be able to enumerate host paths and format them in a way that could be used to attach them to a container, maybe it makes sense to wrap it up there.
That's a good point. Yeah, we'll explore that as well. Thanks.
Probably the person I'd ask for advice on this would be Nick, just because he's probably got more experience than any of us on those commandlets.
Yeah.
But he's out this week.
Yeah, we did sync up with him around this as well.
Excellent. All right, so we have a couple more minutes. Patrick, you're going to do some of the project management stuff on 116?
Yeah, sure. Let me get this shared back out again. Okay. So Claudia's been really hard at work working along with the conformance working group to reduce the number of images that are used in the end-to-end and conformance tests. And so a whole bunch of the PRs that he had during 15 were kind of on hold because people didn't want to change the tests right then. And a bunch of those just merged. And so I created a done column here for 16 and tried to move the stuff that I was aware of that wasn't in 15 into here, because the GitHub rule was automatically still merging stuff, putting stuff in this column rather than this column. So that's corrected now. And so what's left is we still need to basically clear out this 15 backlog and drain this in progress and review queue for stuff to go into 16. So I guess I'll just go ahead and get this cleared out real quick, because there's nothing else going into 15. But the kind of the bigger issue here is we need to get a clearer picture out for people on what we're actually working on and what we're not working on. So that way it's easier for them to find places to contribute. So let's get that column out of the way at least. And so I think what I'd like to do is for next week, if there's something that is assigned to you in the backlog or in progress that you're not working on, go ahead and get it back here into this general backlog column. So that way we can focus on finding someone else to work on it. We're out of time today, and so I don't think we can go through all of these, but I do think we should take some time next week to try to identify what we think are actual critical issues that we would want to prioritize for fixing, because they're going to basically be hurting end users the most. And see if we can get volunteers to take some of those issues. So separate from the bugs, I'm still working on the container D stuff. I still don't have a clear ETA from the container D team on when they're going to have a release that's ready for Windows and builds available. So I've been working with Adelina on some early testing for that. But we're still hitting some issues where we basically can't even complete a test pass. Things start hanging before that. And so once that is at a point where it's on test grid, I think we'll be on a better track to identify whether or not we can, declare that alpha quality for 16. But right now it's still kind of in a holding pattern there, with the goal of getting that onto test grid. And other than that, I don't think I'm going to be able to take on any feature-specific work from my team, but we might be able to get some of these bug fixes done. The other one is I heard back from James on this one that was pushed out from 15 to 16 on run as username. And he's not going to be able to look at that in the next few weeks. And so if someone else wanted to take these changes and create an alternate PR, then that's something that's available if someone wanted to take it. Basically, the only thing that really needs to be done is there's a proposed API update in this one that needs to be changed. So it's basically just swapping out some field names. But James already had tests there, so if you made the same change everywhere, then you should be able to run the test and have it pass, and then get that submitted.
Is that all there's left for run as username?
Yeah.
Well, there's some API validation that also needs to be added, I think, to the PR. But yeah, that'll come up as part of the API review.
Right. On the container D, Patrick, I know in the past you mentioned there were some updates from Windows that needed to be made for us to keep making forward progress. Did those get made?
I I don't think there's any updates needed for Windows specifically. The issues that I was tracking were all shipped, or fixes were shipped in either the May or the June patches. And so this is viable on Windows Server 2019. And so we'll test it there first. There may be some new features that need 1903 or later, but like the minimum version would be 2019.
Okay, got it.
And so the goal would be to get to feature parity there between Docker Shim and Containerd on 2019, and then we'd add new versions of Windows and new features later. And so fixing some of the things we talked about, like single file mapping and stuff like that, some of those will work on 2019. But some of the newer network improvements around things like DSR and stuff like that would need 1903 or later.
Got it. All right,
So,
cool.
all right.
I think we're out of time as well. Anything anybody else wants to bring up that's urgent? All right, cool. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate all your work. And next week, we'll spend a lot more time on our backlog. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.